Okay, I hope they don't run out of power. Yeah, we're in Mark, right? We're still in Mark. But I am going to do a slight segue because of the question I was asked. And let's see if this works. You know, this means of Mark or from Mark. So this is Markon, kind of Markon. I got some quick words of the day for you, and look, they're different. So D-E-S-E, dese, deo, deo to bind and binds. This word, though, is a really important word. Scale, scales. Scales is the thing. It means, and this is really an interesting word in Greek. And I've given you this word before. We had it in Thessalonians. Scales means, is usually translated a vessel, an implement, an equipment, or apparatus. But anytime you see this word, okay, let's think about it. If you're a fisherman in Greek, I remember what the word hareo. If you're a fisherman, what's the most important thing to you? Your implement. You got your nets, right? You got nets, you know, whatever your angling equipment is, your boat, right? If you're a sailor, it's the boat, right? If you're a potter, it could be your wheel, okay? But in most professions, what are their implements? Do they have any implements? Not necessarily, right? Maybe borrowed ones. A day worker, you know, might have implements borrowed from the guy who's hired them, right? In Greek culture, in ancient culture, the most important implement, the most important thing is your wife. And so, scales in Greek, scales specifically means a wife. A wife as a contributor to the culture, to the society, to the work of the businessman. And what we have misunderstood, well, like for example, remember Little House on the Prairie, right? In Little House on the Prairie, how important was the work of the mama in Little House on the Prairie? Oh, was it? Right? Well, for some reason, we imagine in ancient cultures, what's a woman doing? It does depend on her social and economic class, you know, to a large degree. But think about it. What is she going to wash? Do they have any plates? Any silverware? There's no plates. There's no silverware. How's she going to cook? I want to talk about a little bit about cooking today. We'll get to cooking. But, you know, what's she cooking? Now, cooking is a big deal. Food preparation is enormous. But she's not fixing chickens, right? Because you got to sacrifice meat. So, what is she doing? She is aiding her husband, and not only that, she's taking care of her children, but she's aiding her husband. And the aid of the husband, if you remember the 30th Psalm, right? Remember? All the household stuff that's listed, you know, and a lot of it's not cooking and cleaning, right? It's doing. Because in a modern culture, women have become doing more and more of what? Household type work. Where in the ancient world, women did more and more of actual occupational work. Remember, a fisherman's wife is a fishermaness. A deacon's wife is a deaconess. Okay? A deaconess does what? A priestess does what? She helps the priest. A deaconess helps the deacon, right? And that view of the ancient culture is women have much more value than they even do in a modern culture. So much that they call them the word for vessel. How common are vessels in the ancient world? What kind of vessels do you have? Pottery ones, right? You know, you don't own pots. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But just, I want you to understand this word is a very important word. And when you find it, what we're talking about, you know, a woman, a wife, gyne, you know, is a wife. But a skouos is a woman who is valuable, a wife who is valuable. So, very...
In the past, you've talked about shield partner too. I can't remember what the word is for that, but
Yeah.
that was a similar type of relationship.
Or even more important, that Paul says, all the time, that the purpose of man is to stand in front of and protect his wife. That's a man's purpose, is to protect. So it's interesting that we have these words that come up, and these words are words from Mark, but I'm going to give you a context of something else in a moment here. D-I-A, got a better one. There's one of them that's good. I should throw away the other ones. D-I-A-R-P-A-S-A-I. Let's see. Dia represo, to seize, to spoil, to plunder. O-I-K-A-I-N, oikeia, oikos, a house or home. And let's see, I-S-C-H-U-R-O-N, assuron. Assuros is a basic word. Forceful, boisterous, can be translated boisterous, mighty, powerful. In mysterion. What I want to do, though, is I want to very quickly, Ann asked me this question, and I know it's burdened a lot of you, from 1 Timothy 2:11 through 15. Probably know the one I mean, because we read it every year, almost. It's about, and I'll quickly see if I can get this, because I got parsed. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. That's Timothy 2:11 and C12. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She must be silent. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. But a woman will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with propriety. So I parsed this in Greek, and I'm going to tell you what it means, okay? Because I know this has bothered a lot of women, and I think in all good faith we should look to see what it says. See if it says exactly what the English translation, that's the NIV, says. So let's see what it says. In Timothy 11:15, the A is added. It's woman, gone, so wife. Wife should mathetes in hushya, in stillness. And pa, that's pa means basically full, complete. Hupotasia. And hupotasia is the word. Hupotasia is one of those words, the hupe words. Remember the hupe words? Hupe means under. Hupetasia, taja, and hupe means under, and taja means order, under order. Jesus is hupetajo to God. The world is hupetajo to Christ. In other words, it is ordered under. It has order under. Now, the first thing in understanding this is you need to understand this from a Greek culture. Okay, how many women in Greek cultures go to school? Zero. What schools do they have? They have three types of schools. Anybody want to guess? They have the gymnasium. Gymnasium is where you go and you learn athletics and you learn intellects. And it's the basic school that all young men are sent to in Greek culture, to the gymnasium. The gymnasium is the classic thing. They have the lyceum. What's a lyceum? Lyceum is after you've gone to the gymnasium and you're a man, which is like you're 35 years old, and now you go talk and listen to Socrates or to other people discuss. And the lyceum is also free. The gymnasium's, I guess you call it free, only to free people, free men, free men's children, and you were trained there. And by, slaves could also go there. Slaves probably listened, right? And whatever. But there's the gymnasium, there's the lyceum, And finally, there is the shola. The shola is where you paid money. So if you wanted to learn Greek or better Greek, or you want to send a slave, a book slave, to learn a book, learn to read and write, right? You would send them to the shula. Shula is where you pay. So women were not sent to any of them. So how do women learn in Greek culture?
From their husbands and children.
Maybe from their husbands, maybe from their fathers, maybe from the slaves around them, right? From other things. How do they teach slaves in Greek culture?
Well, what do you mean when you say learn? You know, they probably learn from their mother.
From their mother.
What they need to do as well, but are you talking, how do they learn to read or anything like that?
Okay. This is some people have this argument against homeschooling, which is a silly argument in my opinion. But what kind of environment is at home? Little House on the Prairie. Okay? The environment in the little schoolhouse on the prairie is what? The teacher stands in front and the children are silent and listen to the teacher. And the teacher gives them direction, right? And the children all learn to sit quietly and learn, right? Now, what's the environment of Little House on the Prairie where the mom is teaching little girls to cook or the little boys to cook?
Interactive.
Hands-on, boisterous, everyday life, interrupting, right, mom? Hey, mom, what do we do with this, right? Right? So okay, let's say I take a Greek woman and I bring her into a lyceum or a gymnasium or a shula environment. What is she used to?
Interrupting.
The guy makes a statement and she does, if she has, right, normality in her thing, she goes, what's that mean? Right? Yeah. Paul had written this way before. Remember the Corinthians when they had the separation between, and he told them, don't yell out across the separation, right? Because the speaker's speaking, and what is she used to doing? Because this is Greek culture. Also, there's another way that they used to teach Greek slaves and wives. You can imagine. How did you teach your slaves? Well, you use corporal means if you wanted to, right? The way you taught your children. So, what Paul is saying here, we're looking at this completely wrong. It says, Gyne, a wife, should learn in quietness and under order. Why?
Because it's out of order, it's chaotic. There's so
You
much
want
houses
the
going
service,
back.
you want it to be orderly
Because
and quiet
that's
and
the
listen to the
culture,
speaker.
that is the,
The culture of the Greeks was different. It was very open and you did what you kind of wanted to. I mean, this really was an accepting issue. There wasn't a lot of this foreboding, I can't do this, I can't do that. That wasn't Greek culture.
Bingo. That is exactly right. And so what you're asking the men to do, this is not to the women. This is to the men. Because the men are supposed to teach them to learn how. The way the men learn in the gymnasium and the way they learn in the lyceum and the shula. Right? Because the women have never had the opportunity to go there. So basically they're saying to teach the women like you would in a shula or a lyceum or a gymnasium. In other words, the women are they equal or are they different?
Equal.
They're equal. So when we read this in English, we get this completely different impression. In the modern era, now I think before 1400s they probably got this because in general women did not go to school. But we don't get it because this is countercultural to us. Women always go to school, right? Except in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? So all that Paul is saying is teach the women the way you teach men. It's totally equality. And it goes on. In 12, now here's one that always gets people. It says, I do not epitrepo, turn over, give to a woman, a gyne, a wife, to didasko, basically teach doctrine. Didache, or to have authereto, literally religious authority over a man. And the word isn't near. The word is not anthropos. The word is a specific men. She must be hushia. Now, why do you think Paul would write this? religiously, where were women religiously in Greek culture? Where did you find women religiously in Greek culture?
Oracles.
Oracles and priestesses. Mysterion, priestesses, and oracles. What did the oracles do?
They spoke messages from the gods.
They brought the messages from the gods. Okay, look what Paul is telling them. Okay, what they have done in Greek culture, do women and men worship together?
No.
Never. There's only a couple of festivals where men and women are ever together, and they're always kept separate. Okay? Women and men in Greek culture do not worship together except in the mysterions. And in the mysterions, they take the place of priestesses. So the big deal here is, in the Greek culture, when a woman is before men in that Greek culture, where are they? They are authority figures in the religion. So Paul is simply telling them this. I don't want your cult, Christianity may look like a mysterion, but you're not supposed to be a mysterion. You are not a mysterion. You are not a Greek, pagan religion. So again, when we look at this, we look at this as, I don't permit women to teach or have authority over a man, over men, right? But what Paul is trying to do is he's trying to make this turning point within the Greek culture that is different in Christianity and different in Judaism. Now, keep this in mind, because the next statement he makes is this. And by the way, he uses the same word for still. In other words, there's assumption. Okay, what is the assumption if a woman is in authority in a religious context? What is the assumption of her knowledge and intellect and wisdom? What's that?
Superior.
The superior, that's right. So in one case, Paul says, okay, teach your women the way you teach men, so he just made them equal, right? In the other case, he said, don't put the women in authority over men the way the Greek mysterions and pagans do, because what did he do? He just made them equal with the men from a religious standpoint. Because Greek culture does not view women equally to men. Look how many goddesses there are in the Greek pantheon. And who is really ahead? Is Zeus or Hera really the head of the Greek pantheon? Okay? We know. Now look what he does, because he fixes this for us. Because in 13 he says, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. Now the problem in English is what? What did we just assume? Okay, who was really made first, the slugs or Adam? If I put in here, for slugs were formed first, then Adam, then you would say what?
Slugs are in charge.
Slugs are in charge, right? The point is this. In Greek, in Hebrew culture, what is the highest pinnacle of creation?
Woman.
Woman! Woman is the highest pinnacle of creation in Greek culture, or in Hebrew culture, not in Greek culture. Women are considered below men as animals, like slaves, okay? But in Hebrew culture, women are considered the peak of creation, and they are. Have anybody read Genesis? Who's created last?
Woman.
And what was created first? Slugs and parameciums and things in the ocean and crawly things, right? Man in Hebrew culture is considered less than woman. So Paul, he tells first to make the women equal in learning. Then he says make the men and women equal in religious things. And then he says, okay, Adam was created first and then Eve. So therefore Eve is?
Higher.
Now look what he says. And Adam was not, and the one is added. Adam was not, it's not deceived. It's apato, which means cheated. He was cheated. Cheated. And it was woman who was ex pateo, seduced wholly. In Greek, completely cheated. Cheated completely. And became, the word is genomai, became, the A is added. Parabasis. 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 Para means
Same.
near. Basis means foot, walking. Now, I have a problem with their translation of parabasis. Parabasis in the Strong's is considered a violation, but parabasis means near walking, literally. Near walking. Either way you want to look at the word. If you look at it as a violation, why was it a violation? Because she was cheated. What was she cheated out of?
Innocence or,
Innocence.
Her perfection.
Perfection.
Because she was created last. Is Adam perfect? Not in Hebrew thought. Who is perfect? Eve is perfect. And she was cheated out of her perfection. So that is the violation, not necessarily her violation, but she was supposed to be the perfection of creation, and she was cheated of that. Okay? So let's go on. But, the women will be is added. He doesn't say women. There is no pronoun here. But saved. Who is saved?
So you're saying in the Greek text there is no noun there, there's no the woman, it's just who will be saved in verse 15?
But saved. Who are we talking about in the previous verse or the previous thing?
The woman.
And man.
Both of them.
Both of them. Because the noun focus of this is Adam and Eve.
Right.
Now Adam and Eve,
Jointly,
but Eve was cheated.
right.
Eve was perfection and Adam wasn't. Hebrews says Adam is not perfection. Okay? But look what it says. Even if it is women, you can say, saved, suzo, through, the word is not childbearing. The word is teknogonia. Literally, tetragonia, I've got a better thing in here. Parentage. The word in Greek is parentage, literally teaching children. Teaching children. Teknogonia, teaching children. Parentage is a better word in English. Not childbearing. It is not. It has nothing to do with childbearing. I don't know why they even. Look, whoever did this should be fired. Who does not say anything close to childbearing. Technogonia. You can't even see a childbearing in here. It's technological, right? Gonia. Okay, through parentage. If they can, it's not a female pronoun here. It's they. It's a generic pronoun. If they continue, literally stay in pistis, to be persuaded, in agape, God's love, and hagiosmos, purification, that is like the gods, with propriety. Okay, so if it's not childbearing, it's parentage. Now, you say the question, why does parentage save you? Whether you're a male or female, why does parentage save you? I think that's the last verse, by the way. Why does parentage save you? Because
pass it on to the next generation.
That's right, because you pass it on to the next generation. It's okay, whether you're male or female. Look, the thing with female, Eve, okay, you can look at it, there's two ways in the Greek. If Eve is perfection and she was cheated and became imperfection, then she is perfected and becomes like Adam through what? Teaching her children, right? And the whole concept of this is teaching. So they're basically telling the wife, the woman, to teach her children how? The way they do it in the gymnasium, in the lyceum, and the shula. In other words, she is the authority in the teaching of the children. By the way, that's not the way the Greeks look at world, right? Who is the authority in teaching children? The father, the man, right? And what Paul is doing is he's turning the culture upside down. It's not the woman who gains salvation through child rearing. It's rather Adam and Eve who gain perfection, in other words, through the future, because they teach their children. And by the way, they teach their children the three things, right? The three things, pistis, to be persuaded, right? Pistis. Agape, God's love. That is the love that man cannot have. And holiness, hagiosmos. And by the way, you can be persuaded, but can you have agape? Nope. Can you have hagiosmos? Nope. So again, this is another paradoxical thing. But I think that if you look just at the basic Greek, I mean, this ain't difficult. I'm really irritated with the translation. I think translation is terrible. And I wish the pastors would explain this, because I think it'd make people a lot more happy. Because even guys, when they hear this, they kind of cringe. Right, guys? When you hear this being read in church and you go,
I
ugh.
just think they're leaving something out.
Yeah, what are they saying?
It just can't be right. I mean,
Well, it isn't right. You know, we have these people that have translated this stuff forever, and they've used wrong words and incorrect words, and it's totally mistranslated. And that's what we send pastors to the seminaries to teach, so that they know the difference and can explain this. You know, it's not like we're making up anything. We're just looking at what the Greek says, for goodness sakes, you know? And the Greek is kind of clear, in my opinion. It's very clear. And if you look at it culturally, you immediately understand what's going on, right? It's not like, you know, it's not like we're walking into middle America, right? This is Greek. It's Greek. So,
But isn't that the basis for what the Missouri Synod bases a lot of their decisions on, in terms of only men in leadership positions and stuff?
That and Leviticus.
well,
there's other verses.
Yeah, there's other.
That says we're leaders.
I will assert to you there is no verse anywhere you'll find in the Old Testament or New Testament, if it's properly looked at in the Greek or Hebrew, or Aramaic, it happens to be in Aramaic, you happen to find one in Daniel, that ever says that men and women are not wholly and completely equal beings, whether in marriage or out. Now, I will balance that with cultural assertion that in a culture of might makes right, it sure is nice if I'm a woman and I'm in a might makes right culture, I would sure like to have the protection of a father or a husband or somebody, a brother looking after me, because otherwise I'm prey to anyone. Okay? But once we have a culture that we have today, where it isn't exactly might makes right, I would still like to have the protection. You know, I get afraid when I'm walking down the street and some dumb guy's chasing me, right? So I can imagine how it would feel to a woman who, you know, maybe over, you know, guy may be 100 pounds heavier. So, you know, let's be wise in the way we look at the world, right? Let's be wise in the way we look at things. So in any case, I thought that was interesting stuff. Let's go to Mark. Mark chapter 3:20. And I shouldn't have titled it Disciples, I should have titled it Parables, because we're just moving into parables. In 20, then Jesus entered a house, and that's added, by the way, all that. Jesus entered a house is all added. Again, a crowd gathered so that he and his disciples, that's added, were not able to phagio, to eat a loaf. They took away the artos. In other words, eat a loaf. Why weren't they able to eat a loaf? Greeks would know this, but we don't. Why can't they eat a loaf? There's a crowd. Philippus, in Greek, to be pressed against. Why can't they eat a loaf? If you got to eat a loaf in a Greek culture, what do you have to do?
Recline.
You have to recline. Because if you can't recline, you can't eat. People do not eat. Okay, the only people who eat standing up or sitting down are slaves. Okay? So you don't eat unless you're reclining. Okay? And I have to, sorry ladies, I have to add this, or a woman. Women will eat, you know, don't necessarily have to recline, but men have to recline to eat, free people. Okay? And I suspect as the modern mysterion or the mysterion came through, if women are equal, then therefore women also would recline. Cultural. Anyway, Jesus in the house, they couldn't eat because, you know, and let me talk about eating. I want to talk about eating just a little bit. I kind of mentioned this before. Most people ate how many times a day in this culture? Once. Who ate twice? If you're wealthy or military. The military ate twice. If you read my book, Centurion, in the centurion, one of the big things about being in the Roman army, which was really cool, the Roman legion, was you got to eat twice. In the morning, you got wheat gruel, and in the evening, you got wheat gruel. Okay? You ate twice. Most people didn't have anything to eat, okay, except once a day. And you might have eaten in the morning, usually midday meal was when you ate. Most people did not eat. What did they eat?
Wheat gruel.
Nope. The really nice thing about being in the Roman army is the Roman army had pots. They usually had 2 big cauldrons. Pots were great. The problem with pots is what? An iron pot, okay, is made of iron. And iron is a lepton. How many leptons can I make out of an iron pot? Bunches. Those things are worth millions. You know, like, okay, we think a tank's $1 million, right? Or plus, right? Maybe more than that. 5 million, but I don't know how much a tank is. Airplanes are worth millions and millions of dollars, right? But we think of an army, right? An army moves on its stomach. So a pot in the ancient world is worth $1 million, literally. And they have 2 of them. Every legion, you know, every, what do they call that group in the legions? Oh man, I gotta reread my own book. Anyway, each of those groups, large groups, had 2 pots. And so they could cook enough gruel to feed them, okay? And for punishment, they fed them barley gruel. You read my book, the punishment rations were barley usually, barley gruel, because it's horrible. Horrible, make some barley gruel and see. You know, it's not like grits. Grits is good. But, you know, wheat gruel, I can't handle malto meal, but, you know, that's what they were eating. Anyway, only a person who was very, very wealthy could have a pot. But pots were very, very expensive. And the only place they had pots in Hebrew culture, where did they have pots in Hebrew culture? Everybody knows this. In the temple, because they had to boil the meat. Matter of fact, one of the things that they prevented, what can you not do with meat if you're Hebrew? You can't roast it. Well, you can't eat it raw, that's for sure. But you can't roast it. You cannot roast it. It has to be boiled. And so the only place you could boil it was in the temple. This is one of those laws or rules that prevented you from eating meat unless it was properly sacrificed. So there's a little problem here, okay? And anyway, in the modern era, you know, even the Greeks will not, or the Hebrews won't eat, Jewish people will not eat meat that's been hunted because it's not properly killed, right? Kosherly killed. So the only thing you do is you can bake stuff. You can't boil it. It's really hard to boil stuff. You know, if you ever done a Boy Scout thing, you boil it in leather, boil it in cups. I mean, that's tough. It's hard to do, right? Boy Scouts, it's really difficult. So you don't do it. Boiling is difficult. So you ain't got no tea, you don't have any coffee, it's sad. You know, of course, it wasn't this, you know, coffee and tea, old world, new world. Anyway, you can't really cook stuff in baked pots either. What happens when you start heating it? They crack. Now you can use Schlimmertopf. What's a Schlimmertopf? Schlimmertopf, they had porous clay pots. Most of the pots were porous. So even when you put stuff in them, they were not baked hard enough and they weren't glazed hard enough that it wouldn't prevent water from going into them. So a Schlimmertopf, if you're German, anybody know what Schlimmertopf is? Really? I got 2 in my house. My wife used to make Schlimmertopf chicken all the time. A Schlimmertopf is a porous clay thing that you soak in water. You put a chicken in and junk around it, and then and some water, and then you put the top on and put it in the oven. And a Schlimmertopf is a way to bake meat, so it's edible in a clay pot. Okay, so you can bake stuff, but it's really difficult to boil it. So you can have baked bread, right? You're not going to have any gruels. You know, can you imagine the invention of gruels and stuff like that was like a major invention in human food dynamics, right? We think, ugh, but you know, that was the world. Anyway, really hard. So, food preparation is long and difficult, part of the work that the woman had to do. And it says in 21, when his ho-parents, not his family, literally those close to him. It does not say family. It says ho-para. Ho is a pronoun. Para means near. Those near. In other words, his friends, not his family. heard about this, they went to take charge, literally to Creto, to seize him. For they legoed, they argued. He is out of his existimi. Existimi, he's out of his wits. In 22, and the teachers of the law, literally the grammateos who came down, kata beno, descended from Jerusalem. Okay, they descended from Jerusalem. Keep this in mind, remember. So, where did they say he was? Did it say where he was? Is he in Galilee at this time? They had to descend because, remember, Jerusalem is on a high place, so they had to descend from, but anyway, this is kind of like, anybody heard when you're in British literature, what does it mean when you go down to town?
Go to London.
You go to London. Exactly. So when I katabano, when I descend from Jerusalem, I'm going from Jerusalem. Anyway, who cares, right? They legoed. He is echo. He holds, it's not possessed, it's echo. He holds by Beelzebub. Beelzebub, and it's Beelzebul. Beelzebul is a manure guy, the god of manure. Okay? And his little minions are the flies. So the minions are the flies, and Beelzebul is the manure god. It doesn't say he's possessed, it says he holds. What does it mean to hold? To echo. He worships. He worships the manure god. By the Archeon, the chief of demons, he is driving out, ekbalo, ejects demons. So this is the Lego, the argument of the scribes, the grammateos. And by the way, this is a classic rebuttal. It's found in all kinds of forms in the Mishnah. Classic rebuttal. In other words, the classic rebuttal is okay, this is not a Greek argument, okay? This is a classic rebuttal in Hebrew thought. So this is a Hebraic Hebrew. The Hebrew, and I want you to know where this comes from. This is kind of important. Because the Hebrew, it says, okay, therefore Beelzebub, okay, he worships Beelzebub, and therefore he is able to expel demons of Beelzebub by that power from Beelzebub. Now, if anyone, is this logical?
No.
This is not logical at all. This makes no sense at all. Okay? The assumption here is that Beelzebub is putting demons in people and sending people to take demons out of people. For what purpose? Now, what is this classic? This is classic thinking of, anyone ever read The Golden Bough by Fraser? I think this should be required reading. I think it should be taught in every school because Sir Fraser, his whole purpose was to basically show how illogical magic and spiritualism and irrational paganism is. And the Golden Bough is a treatise against magic and spiritualism. Spiritualism being not just the idea in spirits, but the idea of animism. That spirits in nature, make things happen, that there are spirits that make things happen. Remember, in a Christian worldview, what is making the world do its thing? In a Christian worldview?
God.
Oh, no, it's not God. No, God is not. If you think that, then God made this person die or that person die. God isn't doing it. What's doing it? Yeah, it's a human sin. The natural world was created by God. We're not talking about the timekeeper God. What's that? The idea of the God who made the universe start and then walked away from it? Deism. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a God who's not working through the world. We're talking about a God who basically made and created the world perfectly, and then what happened? Man sinned, right? And then it is imperfect. And so all the bad things that are happening are not because of God. They're happening because of the imperfection that man has put in the creation, the chaos in the creation. But what does God do in the world? all the beautiful things, all the wonderful things you see are the acts of God in nature and creation, right? When we pray that God would intervene within creation. And we see miracles, they're God's intervention within creation. Okay, that's miracles. Spiritualism says what? There are spiritual and natural forces in nature that you can pray to, act with, and make work within that context outside of God. See, what's very interesting about this, and everyone should read Lewis, C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, I think it's, what's the treatise? C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. Mere Christianity. In Mere Christianity, he blows this apart. He blows the idea apart of spiritualism. Because he says, spirits within nature can't make miracles. Because they're bound by nature, right? You can't make natures if you're bound by nature. Where is the only place that miracles can come from? Outside of nature, which assumes what? A deity, God. So the fact there's miracles not only proves God, but proves there is no magic. And I write about this theme all the time in my books because this is a complex idea. This isn't a bumper sticker, is it? This is a very difficult idea to get in your mind, to understand fully. So I like to write about this in my books because this is really something that humans continually think about. Because people get enamored with the idea of magic. But magic is illogical. And that's what Fraser's book is all about, the Golden Bough. By the way, a lot of magic, people that are into magic really use the Golden Bough because it states the laws of magic, which are all irrational. And this is one of the laws of magic. The laws of magic that by the use of a power of force within nature, you can use that power of force to negate another power of force in nature. That is spiritual. So this is, Hebrew thinking is not necessarily magical thinking, but it is irrational thinking. Irrational. Irrational. And therefore, we get from Jesus a logos. So let's see what it says. So Jesus called, it says literally, proskeliomai, called to himself. To Jesus, proskeliomai, called them to himself. That is the grammateus. He calls the grammateus to them. And he spoke, he legoed to them in parabola. 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 Now remember, parabola. Parabola. Here's a parabola. Okay. Now the Greeks don't have a. Okay, Greeks do not have two axes, they only have one axis. Okay, so one axis in Greek thought. So a parabola crosses how many axes? Zero. It gets closer and closer to one axis. Okay, so it never intersects, but a parabola has how many answers? Parabola has one answer. Okay, one answer. Now, if you really want to take this in Greek thought, the Greeks believe that all parabolas touch the axis. We know that's not true. They become infinite. This is Zeno's paradox. I'm sorry. I know I'm giving you big math terms. But you remember Zeno's paradox? Integration tells us why an integrand under a surface goes to a whole number. So therefore, it may not intersect, but it does have a whole number solution, which means every parabola has how many answers? One answer. And so therefore, Jesus argued, legoed to them in parabola. And he said, now notice this. He said, how can, oh, it's Valentine's Day?
Yes.
Oh man, thanks. And that's my favorite. Thank you. Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day to you too. This is really good. Thanks, guys. It says, Jesus, you notice what words did they use? They used the words Beelzebul, the manure god, right? And Daemons. Now, isn't that interesting? Why would Hebrew guys, grammateus, be talking about Beelzebul, manure gods, and demons? What are they implying about Jesus? Well, that he believes in the Greek, or the, not, these, Beelzebul is not a Greek god, it's an Aramaic god. In other words, he doesn't believe in, but what are they also saying? They believe in, well, yeah, Beelzebul, right? Now, I want you to note this. In the ancient world, Paul never said he didn't believe in these other gods, right? We need to be clear about this. Because ancient Hebrews and the ancient Greeks and Paul and all the early Christians believed there were other gods, right? They just believed you weren't supposed to worship them. Okay, worship them. We have a view which is very interesting, but that's okay. But notice what Jesus says. How can Satanas? So this is another rule of magic. What's the rule of magic? Names. Anybody know what the rule of names is? If you can name something, you have power over it, or it has power over you. So therefore, why will they not say the name of Satanas? They kind of half believe in the Beelzebul, half believe, right? They half believe in Beelzebul. They know demons are out there. That's a generic name. I can get away with that. It's not a positive name. But I'm not going to say the name Satanas. Because if I say Satan, that means he might have power over me. That is another rule of magic that the Golden Ball talks about. Okay? So, how can Satanas drive out Ekbalo, Satan? Now, what is this? It's a logical argument. It makes total sense, doesn't it? I mean, and by the way, we have lots of people who believe that this is a true thing. Because, anyone ever heard of homeopathy? Homeopathy. What's homeopathy say?
Basically using a little bit of whatever it causes sickness, to cure the sickness.
Losing a little bit of the sickness to cure the sickness. This is a direct use of one of the rules of magic. This is this rule of magic right here. It's magic. It's spiritualism. It has no basis in anything other than magic. Now, yeah.
All right, for a snake bite, they use snake venom to...
No, they use antitoxin. They don't use snake venom. They use
But
antitoxin.
it's taken from the snake.
It is produced from, it is like taking a virus and growing it to make it you can take a live or a dead virus, or even a live virus, partial live virus that's been fixed so it can't continue, and you can give it to someone and give them, they make antibodies. Homeopathy is, if you tell homeopathy to any legitimate doctor, they will laugh at you. Now there's a lot of guys who want to sell you stuff that will sell you junk, but homeopathy is a magic, is magic. It is it requires a belief. Okay, something to look like homeopathy, like for example, what you said, using injections, like for example, smallpox injections. So I take cowpox, by the way, which is similar to smallpox. That was the original type of injection. Now I use smallpox. Well, smallpox is supposed to be dead, but I use dead smallpox. I don't use live smallpox. I use mostly dead viruses because that causes an antibody process in you. And by the way, I can help people that have some allergic reactions by getting them used to. But homeopathy doesn't say that. Homeopathy says I give minuscule amounts so that it breaks. Okay, pharmacology. I'm going to teach you pharmacology just a little bit. Pharmacology requires what? Dosage and effectivity. Okay, so dosage, okay, for example, if I have arsenic in my pocket and I give you a tiny, parts per billion of arsenic, will it hurt you? No. You probably drink it in your water, it's okay. But if I give you a gram of it, what's going to happen? You're dead. Okay? Dosage, so effectivity and dosage. Effectivity is how effective the drug is or the poison or whatever I'm going to give you. Dosage, most in the ancient world, most poisons, require lots of dosage and they have very low effectivity. It's horrible to kill somebody. You remember old Cleopatra with the asp? Probably not. Because the dosage and effectivity of an asp venom, even if you got it in your neck, no. And the death is horrible. Lingering, horrible deaths. It's kind of like a brown recluse death, right? Very few people die of it, but if you do, it's like rots your body away, So, horrible deaths by mostly natural toxins. Hemlock, when they gave hemlock to Socrates, the hemlock was very concentrated. They boiled it down to it was like pitch black, thick sludge, and then they mixed it with a little wine, right? Ooh, you can imagine drinking that stuff. It's not like you're going to slip a Mickey into it's only in the modern era that we get, these modern drugs, where the dosage, the effectivity is really high. It takes very low dosage to get you, right? But remember, dosage and effectivity. So if I don't have any effectivity, it don't work. Right? That's most natural things, like, what do you call them, vitamins and natural supplements and stuff like that. They have zero effectivity. You hope they have zero effectivity, because if they do, stop taking them. Who knows what they're going to do, right? And you're probably, if you're like that kid who took it in very high dosage of that one natural substance that destroyed his liver. So, like I said, I wouldn't take any natural supplements of any kind. I'd barely take most drugs of any kind, because most drugs have very, very good effectivity and they're dangerous. And weed is legal in Colorado now, so it's okay. 24. If a bacilla, if royalty literally is divided against merizo, to apportion itself, that bacilla cannot stand. Okay, what is Jesus talking about? He has given you a beautiful little political statement here. What has just happened? In about, I think it's 6 BC. I think it was a little bit later after 6 BC, but it's pretty close. We have Galileo, Jerusalem, Syria, There was 4, and I can't remember what the other partition was. But remember, Herod controlled the whole kingdom, and it was apportioned. Jesus says it's not divided, it says merizo. It's apportioned. What's he talking about? He's kicking them he's kicking them. There's Herodians there. Remember, the Herodians and the Grammateus were against him? There's Herodians there, obviously, because what did he just say? Who divided the kingdom? Who apportioned it?
Herod.
No, not Herod. The Romans did. The Romans divided the kingdom into 4 pieces, right? And there's tetrarchs. There's 4 tetrarchs. Actually, there's 3 now, because one of them was sent to Gaul, and he's eating French food with the Gaulians, who don't exactly have French cuisine like they do, right? Anyway, he was sent to Gaul. This is a beautiful political statement. If a royalty is divided, merizo, apportioned against itself, that kingdom can't stand. This is a double entendre kind of thing. Well, not entendre exactly, but it is a double entendre. It's not sexual in nature, it's political and theological. It's a beautiful statement. 26, and if Satanas opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand his end has come, and literally, he has come to a telos. A telos. Now, there's very important here. I'm going to give you 2 things, a bunch of things here. Okay, who did he just call Satan? Herod. He just called Herod Satan. He said, if Satan opposes himself and is divided, who is divided? The 4 Herods were divided, and the Romans. He just called the Romans and Herod Satan. They're divided himself, and he cannot stand. His end has telos. Now, what's important about this? Remember in Matthew calls Satan Diabolo. Diabolo. Diabolo means no logical telos. Yeah, no logical argument, no telos. But he just said he cannot stand, he has a telos. If Satan has a telos, what is it? It's not Satan anymore. I mean, look, there is so much beauty in Mark's writing that is so evident. you know, that in the Greek. It's just beautiful. And if you look at it, you see what he's saying. Because it doesn't say the end to come, it says a telos, a limit. In other words, if it's a limit, it's not a diabolo anymore. In other words, Satan is what? No more. Right? Beautiful. 27. In fact, and this is, in fact is added. Okay, no one, O Deus, no one can enter a ischiros, a forcible, strong man's oikeo. The man is added, by the way, ischiros. No one can enter an ischiros. Okay, the man is added. So look what it says. No one can enter a strong, a forcible oikeo. Not a strong man's house, a strong oikeo.
Fortified house?
Yeah, a fortified house or a kingdom, right? Or a house. And diaprezo, plunder his schools. Plunder his what? Schools.
Vessel.
His wife. His wife, his children, his vessel, his important implements, important things. Look what Mark just did. It ain't a man's, it isn't a forcible or strong man, it's a forcible house. And what is the plunderer coming to take? His family, his, and if you want, you know, if he's a fisherman, his fisherman stuff. If he's a tailor, his needle, you know, his things that allow him to what? To live and work and survive, you know. So no one can enter a strong, fortified house residence to carry off his family, his most important things in life, unless he first binds Deo like a slave. Deo, like a slave, binds like a slave, the forcible, and the man is added. The man is added. Then he can rob his house. What is being implied is bound here. What is bound? The kingdom is bound. In other words, who bound the kingdom? The Grammateus. The Grammateus did. It's not Herod. Herod's kingdom was like split in, but rather the ones who bound the kingdom were the Grammateus, the religious leaders, the people that he's talking about in the Greek, you know, the Greek sense we've been talking about. So they have bound the kingdom. We'll get to this. This is, you know, in just a tiny piece, you see this beautiful logic, you know, this beautiful power and force that comes out of Mark's writing. Now, I plan to be here next week. I'm supposed to leave to go to the Philippines to do demos. So I'm seeing if I'm going to have I'm trying to get a late flight takeoff. So I don't know when I'm going to be leaving exactly. But I'm going to plan for things next week. We'll see how that works out. Thank you, Father, for your word. We pray that you just continue to look at us this week. In your name we pray, amen.